The first thing I'm going to propose to you, and we'll talk about this a lot, is that you inhabit a story. That the framework through which you look at the world is actually a story. And here's the story. The story is you're somewhere and you're going somewhere. And, that can be conceptual or whatever. But there's a gradient between where you are and where you're aiming at, which means no more really than you're doing something while you're sitting there. And hypothetically, you're aiming for something better. And so you're in a state of insufficiency, always. The insufficiencies change, and then you're trying to rectify the insufficiency, and you presume that your current state is less preferable to the state that you're aiming at. And then the way that you bring those two together is sometimes you can do it through thinking, but fundamentally you do it through action. You do it through acting in the world. And so that's sort of the answer in some sense to the mind-body problem. You have a conceptual structure, but when you implement it, you're implementing it not abstractly, you're implementing it through action. And so that's the basic story. It's not a very interesting story, but it's the framework through which you view the world. So it's a value-laden framework. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to act and you wouldn't know what to look at. So it's a value-laden framework. You look at the world through a value-laden framework. So then we might say, well, what is the optimal value-laden framework? That's what we're going to try to figure out. Now, I told you about the war that went on between the communists and the West and how that obsessed me. And so one of the things that I really wondered about was, well, was this just an arbitrary thing? Like did the communists, they had some axioms and we had some axioms, and if you're a moral relativist you might say, well, who's to say which set of axioms are better? Or even who's to claim that you could say that a set of axioms, one set is better than another? That's a moral relativist claim, and fair enough. So I thought, well, maybe this is just an arbitrary thing and it's going to be settled by force, because that's how you settle an arbitrary claim between two competing systems where there's no room for negotiation. So I thought about that for a long time. I wanted to know what the roots were of the Marxist system and what the roots were of the Western system. And what I surmised was that the Western system was actually something that evolved, whereas the communist system was a rationalist construction that was imposed, and they weren't the same thing. And so then I wondered, well, what's Western culture grounded in, and is there any reason to assume that that's real in any sense? And so that's what took me into the study of the underlying stories, fundamental stories upon which our culture, I believe, is based. And some of those are very old. I'm going to tell you a Mesopotamian story. It's one of the oldest stories we know. I'm going to tell you an Egyptian story. Those are sources of our culture. And I think those stories are grounded in much older traditions. And I think they refer to something real, actually real.